Lily, Libby, Scarlett and George begged to finish trick-or-treating on their own, in their street, Lily the green witch with spiders and a pointy hat, Libby the vampire with scary teeth and a blood-red cape, Scarlett the pumpkin, her face bright orange, and George the white creepy ghost with a ripped bedsheet. Mom said yes. All the neighbors wanted to see their costumes, and most of them had plenty of treats. Just our neighbors in our street, though. I'll get the hot dogs ready, so don't be too long, Mom called, and the 4 children went off to see what their neighbors had ready for them. The last house was Mrs. Sims, and she had plenty. As they left, George looked along to the end of their road. Why not try the old house at the edge of the wood? It's creepy enough for Halloween. A waste of time. Nobody lives there, it has been empty for years. Libby shook her vampire head. Ghostly George didn't give up. But tonight, I can see a light in the front window. Maybe somebody moved in. The 4 children all looked down the road to the big dark old house just outside the little wood at the end of their road. Lily squinted. Yes, there is a light in the window. She laughed. Okay, George, we'll give the new people a little Halloween welcome to our street. Why did they feel a bit nervous as they opened the old iron gate? The gate creaked, and they almost turned back. Sure enough, there was a light, a candle in a dirty jam jar, in the dusty old downstairs window. Just moved in. Maybe the electricity isn't on yet. Scarlett sounded braver than she felt. The 4 trick-or-treaters stood close together at the front door. There was no bell, just a rusty old knocker covered in spiderwebs. Lily knocked. The sound was hollow and scary. A face appeared at the window. A thin old lady with straggly white hair. The candle in the jar made her look a little yellow, and very old. Happy Halloween, the children mumbled, in voices that now were no longer so sure that this was a good idea, but the old lady smiled a crooked smile and asked, "Who are you? Tell me your names." The children were polite and told their names. Wishing the old lady a happy Halloween, all they wanted to do was to run. Apart from the pale yellow candle in the window, all around was pitch black. The trees in the garden looked twisted and strange, and the house even older and more broken down than it seemed from the street. I have something for you children. The old lady spoke slowly, and the candle flickered. Lily and Libby were holding hands tight. Scarlett and George were gripping each other's elbows. I have so many apple trees in my garden, the old lady smiled. But it seemed kind of twisted in the candle light today. I picked a basketful of the best and freshest apples. Her eyes fixed on each one of the children. Her eyes looked right through them. I hoped some children might come to visit me. The children nodded. Thank you very much, Libby managed to squeak, in front of the door. The old lady lifted a bony finger, and pointed out of the window. Yes, thank you, it's very kind of you. Scarlett hardly knew what she was saying. She just wanted to grab that basket and run. We'll bring back the basket, we promise, George added, but the other 3 glared at him. Lily spotted the basket, quite near her feet on the stone doorstep, where they had just knocked. She hadn't noticed it before. Funny we didn't see them before, she mumbled, as she picked up the basket of apples, and the 4 children turned and ran for the gate. Only George turned around for a moment. The house was dark again, the candle had gone out. Back home, Lily quickly dumped the basket of apples on the kitchen table. Then the children went to the counter for the delicious-smelling hot dogs. I hope you got plenty of treats, Mum smiled. Loads. Scarlett grinned. And the old lady in the big house at the end of the road gave us a basket of apples, George told her, but nobody lives in that old house. It has been empty for years. Mom shook her head, and they went out onto the patio to toast marshmallows on a small fire and share out their candy. The next morning Mom called the children for breakfast. What on earth were you thinking, leaving that basket of apples on the table? Why? Lily looked hard at the basket. Those apples are rotten, Mom pointed at the basket. Full of worms, and they look pretty rotten. The basket crumbles as soon as you even touch it. It's so old, but it wasn't like that last night, George frowned. The apples looked fresh, red and green. George stared at the basket. The apples were brown and rotting, moldy with worms and maggots crawling all over, flies buzzing, they stink. Libby held her nose. In the bin. Mum scooped up the basket and threw it away. How did that happen? Scarlett wondered. Last night they seemed okay. George couldn't let it go. I have to find out. You can come if you like. He walked to the end of the road. The others followed behind him. The big sign said, "Keep out, dangerous building." A man with a yellow hard hat leaned over the fence. That sign has been there for weeks. Those walls are dangerous, the stones are unsafe. And what about the old lady who lives here? George asked. Nobody lives here, little boy. The man picked up his electric saw and switched it on with a buzz. We are here to chop down all those old bent and broken old apple trees. They are dangerous and rotten, too. You won't find any apples in this garden. George sniffed, and wondered why he could smell the sweet fruity smell of fresh apples. Mrs. Tabby Gray, with her 3 little kittens, lived out in the barn where the hay was stored. One of the kittens was white, one was black, and one gray, just like her mother, who was called Tabby Gray from the color of her coat. These 3 little kittens opened their eyes when they grew old enough, and thought there was nothing so nice in all this wonderful world as their own dear mother, although she told them of a great many nice things, like milk and bread, which they should have when they could go up to the big house where she had her breakfast, dinner, and supper. Every time Mother Tabby came from the big house she had something pleasant to tell. "Bones for dinner today, my dears," she would say, or "I had a fine romp with a ball and the baby," until the kittens longed for the time when they could go to. One day, however, Mother Cat walked in with joyful news. "I have found an elegant new home for you," she said, "in a very large trunk where some old clothes are kept, and I think I had better move at once." Then she picked up the small black kitten, without any more words, and walked right out of the barn with him. The black kitten was astonished, but he blinked his eyes at the bright sunshine, and tried to see everything. Out in the barnyard there was a great noise, for the white hen had laid an egg, and wanted everybody to know it, but Mother Cat hurried on, without stopping to inquire about it, and soon dropped the kitten into the large trunk. The clothes made such a soft, comfortable bed, and the kitten was so tired after his exciting trip, that he fell asleep, and Mrs. Tabby trotted off for another baby. While she was away, the lady who owned the trunk came out in the hall, and when she saw that the trunk was open, she shut it, locked it, and put the key in her pocket, for she did not dream that there was anything so precious as a kitten inside. As soon as the lady had gone upstairs, Mrs. Tabby Gray came back, with the little white kitten, and when she found the trunk closed, she was terribly frightened. She put the white kitten down and sprang on top of the trunk and scratched with all her might, but scratching did no good. Then she jumped down and reached up to the keyhole, but that was too small for even a mouse to pass through, and the poor mother mewed pitifully. What was she to do? She picked up the white kitten, and ran to the barn with it. Then she made haste to the house again, and went upstairs to the lady's room. The lady was playing with her baby, and when Mother Cat saw this she rubbed against her skirts, and cried, "Meow, meow. You have your baby, and I want mine. Meow, meow." By and by the lady said, "Poor kitty. She must be hungry," and she went down to the kitchen and poured sweet milk in a saucer, but the cat did not want milk. She wanted her baby kitten out of the big black trunk, and she mewed as plainly as she could, give me my baby, out of your big black trunk." The kind lady decided that she must be thirsty. "Poor kitty, I will give you water." She wanted no water, she only wanted her dear baby kitten, and she ran to and fro, crying, until, at last, the lady followed her, and she led the way to the trunk. She wanted no water, she only wanted her dear baby kitten, and she ran to and fro, crying, until, at last, the lady followed her, and she led the way to the trunk. "What can be the matter with this cat?" said the lady, and she took the trunk key out of her pocket, put it in the lock, unlocked the trunk, raised the top, and in jumped Mother Cat with such a bound that the little black kitten waked up with a start. "Purr, purr, my darling child," said Mrs. Tabby Gray, in great excitement, "I have had a dreadful fright," and before the black kitten could ask one question she picked him up and started for the barn. The sun was bright in the barnyard and the hens were still chattering there, but the black kitten was glad to get back to the barn. His mother was glad, too, for, as she nestled down in the hay with her 3 little kittens, she told them that a barn was the best place after all to raise children, and she never afterwards changed her mind.